Yo, what is good? What is good? I am just gonna make sure that I'm live everywhere that I'm supposed to be live really quickly. I am going live without telling anybody, um, because I'm like in stealth mode as I restart this podcast. As I restart the Schoolish podcast, I am straight up in full on stealth mode as I get ready to make this thing happen again. And so if you're on LinkedIn or YouTube watching What is Good, thanks for popping into this live. There's going to be a Q&A portion at some point in the live, and I really hope that you join me for that. So if you're watching on LinkedIn or YouTube, shout out where you're located in the chat. Like, put it in the chat, let me know. Um, Eventually, the chat will pop up. Um, It'll look like this, and I will be able to answer questions if we have questions. But I'm jumping into sort of a new season of the Schoolish podcast and starting to stream and record again. So really excited about that. So my Schoolish family who is listening audio only, like you're going to get this as soon as I am done with this stream. I'll upload it to the pod, and you'll be able to get it from wherever you get your podcast. So so for all like 3 to 5 people who are watching, thank you for hopping in on such short notice. If you're just popping in, like throw your location in the chat. I'll shout out where you are. Shout out you as a person. Appreciate you being here. We are talking about what's on the screen right here today, which is that we have a big problem in education right now, a huge problem in education right now. I'm going to be showing you some articles that I have been, reading and sharing with people, um, and a conversation that I think we should be having in education, like right now, actually. So everyone is like familiar, like really, really, really familiar with the teacher shortage. Like we know that there's just not enough teachers to to fill up classrooms, to supply all of um, American public schools with great teachers, and I'm very sensitive to that. I think we've talked at nauseum about that in a lot of spaces and places. But today I actually want to talk about a shortage that is a little bit more concerning to me than the teacher shortage in the American public school system. Before we do that, Yash, shout out to you. Thank you for watching from Philly. Really appreciate that. Feel free to drop any thoughts or questions in the chat as we go along. Um, so I'm actually going to pull up a few headlines for you guys to look at and for us to react to. Um, the first one is this one. Um, I found this like almost a year ago, and I'm bringing it up now because we're approaching the end of the 2023 school year, and like this is, I guess the 2022-2023, right? We're approaching the end of that school year, and this is about to become like really, really. We're about to see whether this is true or not, right? So, um, uh, this news source reported that there is going to be HRX. This is like a human resources like I guess blog or like news site, so to speak. Um, and they predicted in 2022, so almost like basically almost a year ago, um, they predicted that there's going to be a wave of superintendent shortages, and they said things like while the national resignations are still in line with normal turnover rates of the 684 Texas districts who responded to the TASB or TASA superintendent salary survey, superintendent turnover going into fall of 2021 was 15%, which is 2 points higher than the national rate. and 69 districts hired someone with no previous experience. So, like, if you're just looking at that problem, they start by looking at just Texas alone. And if you just look at that problem, 69 districts in Texas hired somebody who had never been a superintendent before, meaning that there was some sort of desperation, right? Texas superintendents, like you can't fill them, you can't fill that position fast enough in Texas, or at least according to this article. And this article, I think, is compiling surveys from a Rand report. Yo, Houston, shout out. Also, like, I should have worn my A-Leaf hoodie. Shout out to A-Leaf. Shout out to we know what SWAT means around here. So I appreciate that. Appreciate you joining the stream. Yeah, Houston, anytime, yo, throw your thoughts in the chat, throw your questions in the chat, anything. For those of you who are just joining, we are talking about the superintendent shortage in the United States of America as it pertains to school. So as I'm showing you this data from this article, right, they basically, like, they're basically quoting the 74 million. The 74 million, great news source for, like, all your education news. Definitely something for you to jump into if you're interested in the state of education and, like, what is happening. So if you go to the 74 million, they a year ago today, or a year ago yesterday, they published an article that talking about fears of a superintendent exodus. Now, this is really, really important because today we're seeing other news sources, um, like the Hinchner Report, publish an article like this that asks who actually wants to lead America's schools. What's fascinating about what I'm seeing is that a year ago, I saw all of these predictions, all of these reports, and what's fascinating is that they're absolutely right. Is a superintendent shortage in the United States of America right now. We can't find people to fill these positions. And here is why that's concerning. Like, if you're like, okay, what's the big deal? Superintendents are not teachers. Maybe we should try to fill these teaching positions first. But here's the point that I'm trying to make here is, if we can't fill the highest ranking, highest paid, typically most powerful position in a school district, what does that say about the health and our ability to hire top talent in the rest of the district? Right? Like, if we can't fill the position that gets paid in some cases almost as much as the president, right? You're looking at your $200,000 per year, right? Like, if we can't fill that position, then what does that say about our ability to fill positions like teacher, assistant teacher, after school care, right? And what does that say about the health of the system altogether? Now, we'll tackle this on another episode, but I made a video about this on TikTok, and one of my homies, Angel, responded, and she said, "Hey, well, like, superintendents are just figureheads, right? Like, what about school boards?" And I'll say this, like, first, we're also having trouble filling school board positions. And my good friend Matt Barnes and I, we do a little podcast every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. Central Time on LinkedIn called the Dad Huddle. Last week, we were actually talking about how there's a shortage of people who want to run for school board for the right reason, right? So, I mean, there's an issue in the school board as well. But the school board, the difference between the school board and the superintendent position is that school boards are they're elected positions. And so, yes, I do think school boards have a lot of power. They have too much power, I would actually argue. It's not, it doesn't feel like the same indicator for me. It is an indicator of a lack of health in the system, but it's not the same exact indicator as a superintendent shortage. So what I want to do on this podcast is two things. We're going to go through a few points from these articles, and then we're going to react to them. And then if you guys have questions or reactions, throw them in the chat because I want to engage with you guys as well. If you're just hopping in, welcome. We're talking about the effects that the superintendent shortage is having on the American school system and what you should do about that shortage. So let's jump back to the 74 million article, um, and we'll do some interrogation live and online. Um, right now. So the 74 million article actually starts the article by saying that more than a quarter of America's superintendents plan to leave their post imminently, and hundreds more are unsure if they want to keep balancing pandemic era 67-hour work weeks and staffing challenges. This new Rand report um, stated, right? So right there at the beginning of the article, what we're talking about is like nearly a quarter, so nearly one fourth of America's superintendents. This is not bound to one state. This is the country. I don't know why this is not a bigger story. I feel like there should be like flashing lights and alarms ringing because a quarter of the nation's top leader of a school district wants to leave that position. Um, Hundreds more. So a quarter are sure that they want to leave. They're like, "Yo, we out." Like this is what they reported last year. We out of here. And then hundreds more are unsure if they want to keep balancing the heavy workload from the pandemic. So like if we want to speculate or if we want to say like look deeper into this, look past this Rand survey and say like why is this happening? The pandemic certainly had an impact on this. But if he were in here, I'm sure he would tell you Everett Hill, who's just like one of the most awesome people ever, often joins my lives and consumes my content. He'll tell you that like teacher shortages and superintendent shortages, school leader shortages, these things have always existed to some extent, but we've been able to better mitigate them in the past. So I like I think this is a problem. It's a problem that superintendents feel overworked. It's a problem that they have a problem with that. I come from a background in education, but I also have this background in like tech software startup ecosystem. So hearing people like bat an eye at 67 hours a week based on what they're paid, I'm like, bro, chill. But still, of a survey with 350 district leaders, a quarter of them said they're not coming back, and then hundreds more said that they were unsure if they want to keep balancing that workload. So let's keep moving in the article. I think what was really important to notice, and this is why I'm excited to revisit this right now, is that this line in the article, it says, while Rand's early look at 2021 departure rates suggests that the big quit has yet to play out amongst superintendents, an emerging trend raised concerns, right? So Rand Rand does this survey every year. And in 2021, what they found was that people said they were going to bounce and they actually didn't. I think that's really important to consider. People said like, "Yo, I'm out," and they stayed. And I think like we talked about this a little bit, but there's a lot of reasons to stay if you're a superintendent in a public school district. One of them is the pay. Um, the pay, in my opinion, would justify a lot of the hours. I got a lot of beef with superintendents and the way that they operate in that position, but I'll save that for a little bit later. But the pay should justify the amount of hours that they're spending. But this is what I've found really interesting next. Urban school district superintendents are leaving in higher numbers than suburban and rural counterparts. That churn could further damage the districts composed of primarily of students of color who were disproportionately impacted by the pandemic. Like we know that people of color had a harder time during the pandemic, and so what they were looking at in 2022 is like saying like, hey, if this trend continues of urban districts like not being able to get the highest ranking leader in those districts, then the districts could further suffer. If you're just joining, you're like, yo, why is this a problem? Like, why does it matter if you can't fill the superintendent position? I want to take a second to talk about why the superintendent position is even important in the first place. So in a school like now I live in Texas, right? And in Texas, I would actually argue that in most of our school districts, the most important official in that school district is the head football coach. Like, and I I know it might sound like a joke, but I'm not really joking. Like if you are Lake Travis ISD and your head coach makes, I'm gonna I'm gonna throw out a number, but I'm also gonna Google it just so I'm not lying. Um, uh, Lake Travis is a school district here in Texas, in Austin, Texas. Uh, and their football coach, I think, is like either the number one or like number three paid, like number three highest paid um, football coach in the nation in high school. Um, I think he makes something like $300,000 a year or something like that. I could be lying about that. Oh no, I'm wrong. I'm lying about that. He makes $158,000 a year as a head football coach for Lake Travis ISD, and he puts guys in the NFL. Look, like if you're a Jets fan, you have him to thank for Garrett Wilson. If you're a Browns fan, you have him to thank, or maybe be mad at for Baker Mayfield, right? But there's quite a lot of weight down here in Texas put on these football coaches. Houston, yeah, you said it, bro. Like head football coach is pretty much the mayor of the town. Like, and so I would argue that like that guy has more influence over more students than like a superintendent. But if you're not, oh, pause, yo, what up, Aaron? Yo, glad to see you in here, man. Um, if you're not familiar, if you don't know, like a superintendent is quite a powerful position. They set like wide sweeping policy. They enforce policy in districts. They can create new rules in school districts. They are often beholden to a school board, but for all intents and purposes, I mean, they are like the president or they're like the governor. I mean, they are the highest ranking official in school districts. So if you can't fill that position, to me, there is some sort of signal that the snake is rotting from the head down, right? Like like the carcass is rotting and the head is rotting first, right? Um, I guess you can even argue that that the head is not necessarily rotting first; it's all rotting at the same time. Um, so yeah, so like if you're confused, a superintendent like is really important. Uh, if you need examples, like throw it in the chat. I'll sort of pull up some examples, but um, I just wanted to like briefly pause and say that because it is really important. You can think of them in a lot of ways as like a head football coach. They shepherd the school district towards a set of values or a set of goals, especially if school districts are like at risk of like in Houston ISD being taken over by the state, right? Like the superintendent is the person who's accountable for those performance metrics. So they should be the ones that care the most about low reading rate or low literacy rates and low rates of passing standardized testing. When a superintendent is great, things can go really well. When a superintendent is bad, things can go really bad. The example I will give you, I give this example to a lot of people of a great superintendent. And I'm going to see if I can find anything written about him, and I'll pull it up on the screen. Um, but one of the greatest superintendents, I believe, in the whole country is Corey Steiner, who is the superintendent of Northern Cass ISD in North Dakota. Corey is amazing for a lot of reasons because he, the superintendent, and this is an example of how powerful it can be, he has the power to run certain experiments in his district. For example, there are certain schools in Northern Cass ISD that don't have grades at all because Dr. Corey Steiner believes in competency based approaches, right? And so, because he, the superintendent, believes in something that a lot of us consider innovation in education, he is able to almost unilaterally make that decision for his school district. If you don't know Corey Steiner, connect with him on LinkedIn, look him up. He's absolutely incredible. But what's even more interesting is if you look to if you look to Fargo, North Dakota, they are also trying some really interesting experiments, and their superintendent will actually go sub for teachers. He's a phenomenal guy as well. His name is Rupak Gandhi. Rupak came from the classroom. He was my assistant debate coach when I was in high school and is now a superintendent. And his wife is the superintendent of the neighboring district. In North Dakota, all the superintendents in the state got together. They said that, yo, like, here's what innovation looks like for us in our state, onward and forward to that goal, right? So a superintendent has the power to set a goal and push the whole district towards that goal. So when you can't fill that position, that means that you have teachers without guidance. You have school leaders without guidance, right? Like, let's be honest about school boards. Most of them don't know crap about education or learning. You have a school board without guidance, right? So it's a huge deal that we can't fill that position. I do see a comment. Oh, Yash, can you say more about what you want to know? Like, but I love this. Like, Yash asks, would love to get your thoughts on recent news at increased teacher pay. I generally think that increased teacher pay is really, really important. I like, generally speaking, I will never ever hope for anybody to make less money, right? Like, I think for the most part, um you should be able to make as much, like, working a job requires you to make as much money as you can in this lifetime, any job. So I think teachers should be paid more in a lot of areas. Um, but I also have a lot of beef with teachers. I don't think every teacher in American schools is good right now. I think we have a lot of average teachers. I myself, like, as a student, I remember I had a lot of average to terrible teachers. I also had I count it as a blessing. I had a lot of incredible teachers. I had some when I got to high school. I'm talking. I had like cream of the crop, top notch, incredible teachers. And I don't mean they were incredible because they were good at lecturing. Like, I mean, those people cared about me in a way that I cannot say I experienced before them, and I can't even say I experienced that from any college professor after them. Shout out to Westside High School in Houston, Texas. Um, so I think teachers should get paid more, but I also think that we have to simultaneously figure out a way to to increase the quality of teachers as well. Yash, can you DM me that article? I can't grab it from the comments, and I'll pull it up side by side, and we'll go through that and react to that as well. I do see that it is from Teach for America, which I do work for Teach for America, and let me just say this: my views are my own, and they're not reflective of Teach for America's views. But I will say that article is from One Day Studios, so big shout out to One Day Studios. My guy Joel is over there, who kills it. Favi, Aggie, like, y'all are amazing. That is an incredible team of people that I'm always trying to work with. But I think what you're talking about, Yash, is there is a there's a charter school in New York City. There's a couple of charter schools in New York City right now, I'll tell you, that do pay over six figures. I built a school in Austin, Texas that starts at six figures. Yeah, just hit me in a DM and I'll pull it up. But for now, let me scoot over to Houston's comment really quickly. And he says, you raise a good point here. To me, if a superintendent doesn't have an instructional role attached to them, they don't have an operational effect on a district. I believe superintendent should be the chief instructional designer, researcher, instructor. Man, yo, Houston, like, that is absolutely freaking right, man. Like, I am with you. I actually, uh, so we can just move here because this is where we're going anyway. For those of you watching, there's a superintendent shortage. We pulled up the facts. We read about it a little bit. And so now the question is, like, what should we do, right? I personally think that as a parent right now, and I posted this on LinkedIn, what I would do right now, and by the way, I am a parent and I have already done this. Well, I guess I didn't technically do this, and I'll explain what that means. But as a parent, like, I would never put my child in the public school system right now. If you can, I would pull your children out of school. I would pull them out of public school. If I we'll talk about on a later episode why private school and traditional public school is basically the same thing. But I would pull them out of traditional school. I would homeschool them. I would find a dope micro school. I look up Acton Academy if you can, right? Like I would pull them out. I think going back to Houston's comment, that's exactly right. One of my biggest problems, I told you earlier in this episode that we would come back to the idea that I have beef with the superintendent position in general. And I think the reason why, I'll tell you a quick story. So when I in my second year of teaching, I was teaching in Fort Worth ISD. Fort Worth is a city in Texas. It's a pretty large city compared to a lot of cities, but Fort Worth feels like a small town. That's important for this story. Feels like a small town. I taught at this little school called Rosemont Sixth Grade Center. And so I taught all sixth graders. I was teaching them world cultures, which I did intentionally because I didn't want to teach a tested subject ever in my life. I didn't want that kind of pressure. But one of the things that class kind of turned into a protest and social movement, right? Like as we learned about the patterns and history of people in the world and how they engaged with the environment around them, we learned that in the modern day, that it is worth fighting for what you believe. And so my students were trying to do this project where they found a problem in the school that they could solve. And one of the problems that they found was that lunch is terrible. Lunch is bad because it's not nutritious. It's often like low quality. And as a matter of fact, at the time, this was 2015, the FDA counted things like French fries as a vegetable. They counted tomato sauce on a pizza as a vegetable. So you could serve pizza and French fries, and it would be counted as vegetables, right? Like what? That was the thing. So we basically worked with this organization. We got Whole Foods to sponsor free salad bars at our school, and we needed approval from the highest ranking individual in the school, from the superintendent. And guess what? Dude ghosted me for months. It's a guy named Kent Scribner. I'm calling him out. His name is Kent Scribner. He was the superintendent at the time. I literally went to his office unannounced and stood outside for 4 hours and he wouldn't see me. Like I was a teacher on the front lines in the district and I stood in front of his office for 4 hours and he would not have one conversation with me. So I got beef with superintendents that, like Houston suggested, if you don't have an instructional role attached to your job, if you don't know what it's like in that classroom, if you don't know like what teachers go through, if you don't know certain teachers by name, I got a big issue with you, dog. Like a big issue. Let me pause real quick. Yo, Sam, what's up, man? It's good to see you in here. Send me the edit of that video, by the way. Let me see it. Sam is watching on YouTube. You can also watch this live on YouTube. I just getting back into my podcast. So Schoolish podcast is coming back. This is how we're doing it. So back to the conversation, Houston. I really appreciate that comment because I do think that's true. What do you guys think? Let me know in the chat. Should superintendents have some sort of instructional role? Should they engage in some sort of instructional design or research? Like how often should they spend time in schools? Let me know what y'all think about that in the chat. Now let's jump over to the article that my guy Yash shared with us. I have not reviewed this beforehand, but we're going to do this on live because we about it like that. This actually comes from my place of work. I have never read this article. Oh, this just came out. This is fresh. So I shouldn't feel bad for not reading this. But let me just say, I am. So this is TFA's One Day Magazine, which is, so if you're not familiar with Teach for America, Teach for America is the largest education nonprofit in the United States. TFA has historically placed teachers in low-income schools for 2 years at a time, hoping that they leave the classroom and go advocate for educational equity somewhere else in the world, whether that be law, entertainment, medicine, whether they stay in education. I was not a Teach for America alum. I was rejected by Teach for America. They were like, nah, bro, we don't want what you have. And then after I went off and I made a career of education innovation. They were like, I met some people who were building something called the Reinvention Lab, which is an absolutely incredible part of Teach for America. And at the Reinvention Lab, we have been trying to help Teach for America reposition itself with respect to innovation at the intersection of equity. So, just to say, like, the today's TFA is not your mama's TFA. Like, it's not the TFA that you used to know. It's an organization that's actively trying to change, and I know that because I literally that's literally what I do every day. So, um, so One Day Magazine is like our creative arm at TFA is one of the creative arms that we have, and they're absolutely some dope people with some cool backgrounds. So let's jump into this article though. It's in our ideas and solutions section, which is super dope. Don't know Kelly, but I'm gonna reach out to Kelly and be like, "Yo, we talked about you on live." Um, so it says to promote student achievement, a New York school will pay teachers $140,000 a year. So right off the bat, Yash, like first, thanks for sending this in. I like this, but that's New York City. Like, I mean, it's way better than I'm certain than what they were being paid, but that's New York City. Like 140K. Like if it was in Texas where we have no state tax and like life is cheap out here, like that's New York City. I it might be I'm actually headed to New York tomorrow. So I'm actually gonna try to stop by this school, by the way. Like um I I think this is awesome though. Like there's a national push to increase teacher salaries. I think this is awesome. But one of the things that we've learned from our research, like at the Reinvention Lab at Teach for America, is that pay is actually a smaller part of the equation than you would imagine. I mean, we just talked about this earlier. Is that superintendents were like, yo, and remember, they make way more than teachers. They were like, yo, this workload is crazy. I don't know if I want to keep doing this. Right. So I do wonder right off the bat, like how much are they requiring these teachers to work? There are a couple of charter schools in New York that have for years. I've known about these for maybe 5 or 6 years. They pay teachers $125,000 a year, and they have a high turnover because the average teacher only makes it about a year and a half because of how much work they require from those teachers. I helped to build a school where we were paid over six figures, and we worked 90 hours a week. Um, but it was not the traditional. It was not a traditional school. It was super. It was a super awesome 90 hours a week. It was very worth it, and it was literally the thing that I think I staked my career on. I owe the rest of my career to that place. So, um, and so I'm hoping that's what kind of experience is offered here. So let's jump down a little bit. This now One Day is they're about storytelling. So this is I guess this is in story. Um, oh, so look, so it follows this person who I'm guessing is a TFA alum, Sarah Dela Cruz. She was on the cusp of starting a second job when she ran into a snag. Her hours were already really long at this elementary school, and at the department store she was trying to work at, she couldn't fit that into her schedule. So it looks like she earned $70,000 a year at the Newark, New Jersey school where she worked. Oh, and she started her career there because she was a TFA core member. Yo, shout out to TFA core members. Um, yeah, so look, it says it right here. She lived in New York City where the cost of living is notoriously higher than the national average, currently 128% higher. She struggled to pay rent and daily $12 in tolls to get to work. So see, that's kind of crazy because my guy John Henry, shout out to Loop Insurance. He runs an insurance company called Loop. He had this video once where he was like, "Yo, like in America, generally speaking, like when you hit $70,000 a year, you become less depressed and you get more happy, right? Like because you're able to afford your life. Well, in New York City, that's different, right? Like New York City's cost of living is 128% higher. When I go to New York City, first of all, I have never been to New York City on my own dime. I'll just say that. I have always gone for something for work, where like my job is paying for the food and they're paying for the flights and the hotels. And even then, I just shudder at how much I pay for food in New York. I'm like, everything here, every meal except for those slices of pizza and them hot dogs and the shawarma on the side of the street is like $20 a plate. Like, what is happening here? I'm really from Texas. I'm born and raised. me in Houston from the SWAT, like you don't pay that much where I come from. Okay. So cost of living is high, but most teachers around the country wouldn't bat an eye at 70,000. They'd be like, yo, 70,000, awesome, right? So I do wonder about the cost of living. And I see you just put that in the chat, Yash. Uh, but yeah, oh yeah. This is a great question. Like, do I have any concerns about these major changes happening rapidly? Um, yeah, I do have concerns about this. I one of the things I wonder about this, and I'll jump into this article and read it um later, is that I wonder if this is a temporary boost, because sometimes districts do this where they'll throw money at you for 3 years, and then you won't be able to stay there. They'll cap your salary or they'll make you move to another school. So, but it looks like the Equity Project, which is a charter school in New York City, looks like they bumped their pay up to 140K, which is more than double the national average. Um, and it's also still significantly higher than salaries in New York. In New York City public schools, a teacher with 10 years of experience can earn a base salary of $86,000 a year and a maximum of 101. Wow, that's interesting. And oh, this is cool. Teachers at the Equity Project charter school will also be able to, they'll be eligible for an annual performance bonus of $35,000 a year. Okay, now that's what I want to talk about that for a second. Oh man, I'm so glad you sent this because that's so important. Um, like I think there has to be a way to um acknowledge financially and compensate excellent teachers. I if you go back and listen to Schoolish podcast episodes, you will see I do not believe in the traditional uh model of teaching and learning that's so prevalent in the United States. I know that if I went, I'm going to go visit them. When I go visit this school, I know for a fact, I'm not going to say it. I'm 95% sure that I will be very disappointed with the actual product in the classroom, because there's going to be one teacher standing in front of the classroom lecturing a group of students. And I hate that. I think it's one of the most, I think it's on the record, like all the data shows that it is the least effective way to teach. I know that's happening there, but I'm very happy that these teachers, especially Sarah, are getting their bag, because that's important. You should be able to earn a living as a teacher. So now she's making double what she was making before, and it looks like she'll be able to afford her life in New York City, which is great. I love that she can get this $35,000 bonus, though. I have no idea where the Equity Project is getting their money, but I love that. I absolutely love that. So thanks for sharing that. But what I will say, this article has got some interesting stuff on this. This is really interesting. I'm gonna reach out to our one day team and dig more into this, because this higher teacher pay cultivates student success. I think that's true to an extent, but I don't think higher pay is how we close the gap between superintendents, teachers, or school leaders. What they're telling in the research that I've done, I work on a little product design team inside of our reinvention lab. We've talked to teachers all over the country. We've flown all over the country and talked to teachers, and what they're telling us is that it's like it's about the pay, but it's also not. Like it's about the respect, and it's about the workload, and it's about their ability to be like a whole human being at work and like use the bathroom when they need to, right? So it like pay matters, but I do think that this is a really interesting model of like paying a teacher. So that's, I think that's super cool. We got about, I'm gonna take about 5 more minutes. So anybody, if you have questions, throw them in the chat. I'm gonna get back to Yash's second question here. I hope I'm saying your name right as well. Which is this is, do you have any concerns about these major changes happening rapidly, sustaining over time, or attracting the wrong type of educators? Yeah, I do. I again, like I will tell you, I think the vast majority of teachers in the United States are average at best. And so like if we were able to snap our fingers and say every school across the country, you will start teachers at $100,000 per year, I believe that you would have people signing up to teach for the wrong reason, right? All of a sudden it's now like, well, I can get this bag if I teach. I think that higher pay, and I think I saw something like that in the article. I was just doing it live and didn't really have time to get into it. But I think higher pay is only a part of the solution. The other like really important part of the solution has to be creating a much higher bar to be a teacher. And New York City is already in a state that does that, that you're that I guess simulates that. Like you have to have a master's degree in New York uh to to be a teacher. So there's already somewhat of a higher bar. But I don't think it's enough to really control for people getting into the job for the wrong reason. You don't want the teaching profession to turn into like the gap year thing. And I think to some extent, like that's kind of what's happened at TFA. Teach for America have seen people use Teach for America as a gap year program, and so you've had bad apples who've sort of like polluted the real impact that Teach for America has made in the United States. So yeah, I do see some problems with it, but I think in general it's good. Um, in general, I do think it's pretty good. Um, so yo, I'm gonna get out your hair. I appreciate all you guys for jumping on and being engaged. I did no advertising for this. I'm gonna do a couple of streams like this before I like get fully back into the swing of it. But if you are just jumping in at the end, I'm relaunching my podcast. I had this podcast for 2 years called the Schoolish Podcast, where we get into school plus everything that most people are not willing to say. So if you're like up for like the actual real talk about education, like this is a podcast to subscribe to. You can subscribe to Schoolish anywhere where you get your podcast. We are 10,000 downloads strong, which is cool. Even though like people have been listening, even though I technically shut the pod down. Um, and so I appreciate y'all jumping in. Oh, yo, my guy Dan. What's up, Dan? Good to see you here. Oh, this is an important comment. Most of the teachers I see and deal with are average or sometimes even below average. Money's a motivator, but also having a voice in our profession is important. That's right. Like, boom, right there. Um, so I'm gonna close this stream out. Follow the Schoolish Podcast. You can follow me on LinkedIn. You can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok at just Mike Yates. That is my handle there. Hit me anywhere. Hit me up with topics that you might want to talk about. All that good stuff. Um, Dan, come on next week. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. So cool, y'all. I'm gonna get out of here. Peace. Appreciate y'all for jumping into this.